Something strange happened after the Olympic ice dance final in Milan. At first, most viewers didn't notice it. The arena was still buzzing, cameras were flashing, and the scoreboard showed what looked like a perfectly normal Olympic result: silver medal for the United States, gold for France at the 2026 Winter Olympics. But when the judging sheets began circulating, a different picture slowly emerged. 5 judges believed the American team had done enough to win. One judge did not, and that single set of scores changed everything. The margin between gold and silver was just over a single point. In ice dance, that is incredibly close. Every small component matters: a slightly higher grade of execution, a slightly lower program component score, tiny adjustments that most fans never notice unless they study the judging breakdown afterward. This time, analysts did study it. One judge's scoring stood far outside the range of the others, not slightly different, but dramatically different. Almost overnight, the conversation around the Olympic final shifted. What had looked like a routine result began to feel unsettled. The International Skating Union defended the judging panel, explaining that variations between judges are normal in figure skating. Technically, that's true. Subjective sports always allow room for interpretation. Still, the discussion never fully disappeared. Only weeks later, another unexpected development followed. The reigning world champions, Madison, Chock, and Chock Bates, quietly disappeared from the entry list for the upcoming World Figure Skating Championships in Prague. There was no dramatic retirement announcement, no emotional press conference, just a simple update to the competition roster. Their names were gone. For casual fans, it looked like a normal post-Olympic break. Skaters often end their seasons early after the Games. The Olympic cycle drains everything from athletes, physically and mentally. By the time the closing ceremony ends, many have nothing left to give. But people who had followed Chock and Bates for years sensed something different about the moment, because their story had never been simple. Long before Olympic medals, long before world titles, and long before millions of people recognized their names, there were simply 2 young skaters stepping onto the ice together in 2011, trying to figure out whether a partnership might work. In ice dance, talent alone is never enough. 2 athletes must learn to move as if they share the same instincts. Every edge, every step sequence, every lift requires absolute synchronization. One hesitation, one mistimed movement, and the illusion disappears instantly. Partnerships in the sport often collapse within a few seasons, but something about Chock and Bates slowly proved different. Training sessions stretched late into the night inside quiet Michigan rinks. Music echoed across empty ice while they repeated the same sequences again and again. Coaches watched closely, searching for the rare chemistry that separates good teams from great ones. At first, progress came slowly: small international podiums, incremental improvements, and programs that began attracting attention for their unusual theatrical style. While many teams focused almost entirely on technical precision, Chock and Bates brought something slightly different to the ice. Their performances often felt less like routines and more like short stories unfolding through movement. Judges started to notice. Fans started remembering their names. And without many people realizing it at the time, one of the most enduring partnerships in modern ice dance had quietly begun. What nobody could have predicted then was how complicated that journey would become, because the first Olympic moment they chased together would nearly break the entire story before it truly had a chance to unfold. Long before Milan, long before the judging controversy, there was another Olympic moment that nearly changed everything. It happened in February 2018 inside the Gangneung Ice Arena in South Korea during the 2018 Winter Olympics. The Games in Pyeongchang were already underway, and the atmosphere around figure skating felt electric. Olympic years always carry a different weight. The lights are brighter. The silence before a performance feels heavier. Every movement on the ice carries years of preparation behind it. By that point, Chock and Bates had already spent nearly 7 years building their partnership. They were no longer the promising newcomers from Michigan training rinks. They had become legitimate contenders on the international stage. Their programs had evolved into something distinctive: dramatic storytelling, unusual choreography, and lifts that blended athletic precision with theatrical expression. Commentators often described their performances as cinematic, less like routines and more like scenes unfolding on the ice. Still, Olympic ice is different. When their free dance began that evening in Pyeongchang, Everything seemed to unfold exactly as athletes imagined during years of preparation. The opening edges were clean. Their timing with the music was sharp. Lift after lift landed with the calm confidence that comes from thousands of hours of repetition. For several minutes, the routine flowed beautifully. Then something almost invisible happened during a sequence of fast footwork near the middle of the program. Their skates clipped together. It was the kind of tiny miscalculation that can happen in ice dance when two skaters move within inches of each other at high speed. But the effect was immediate. Both of them lost balance, and suddenly, right there in the middle of their Olympic routine, they fell. The arena gasped. Olympic moments have a strange way of stretching time. What lasts only a second on the ice can feel much longer when you realize what is at stake. Years of training, endless travel, thousands of hours spent on frozen rinks around the world, all compressed into a single moment of uncertainty. But what happened next revealed something important about their partnership. They got up. There was no hesitation, no visible panic. They simply stood, reconnected with the choreography, and kept going. Every step afterward demanded absolute concentration. Every lift required them to ignore the mistake that had just happened. Yet they finished the program, skating through the final seconds with determination. When the music ended, the applause carried a slightly different tone than usual. It wasn't just admiration for the performance. There was something else mixed in, a quiet recognition of how quickly Olympic dreams can shift. Later, when the scores appeared, the reality became clear. A medal that once seemed possible had slipped away. For many teams, a moment like that becomes the breaking point. Partnerships in ice dance are fragile by nature. One Olympic disappointment can easily send athletes in separate directions, but in this case, something unexpected happened. The fall in Pyeongchang didn't end their story. If anything, it quietly reshaped it, because in the years that followed, their partnership would evolve into something deeper than either of them originally planned. Not just teammates chasing medals, but two people whose lives were slowly becoming intertwined both on and off the ice. That shift, subtle at first, would eventually change everything about the way the world saw Madison, Chock, and Chock Bates skate. The years after the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang did not begin with dramatic announcements or sudden breakthroughs. At first, life simply returned to its usual rhythm. Training resumed, competitions continued, flights between continents filled their schedules once again. For elite skaters, the calendar rarely slows down, even after an Olympic disappointment, but something subtle had shifted. Sometimes the most important changes in a partnership don't happen during competitions. They happen in the quiet hours that nobody sees, long evenings after practice, conversations during travel days, or the strange calm of empty rinks after everyone else has gone home. For years, Chock and Bates had shared nearly every part of their professional lives. Early morning practices, strategy meetings with coaches, endless repetitions of the same step sequences until the edges felt automatic. Over time, those shared routines slowly stretched into something beyond skating. A conversation after training lasted longer than usual. A flight to Europe turned into hours talking about life outside competition. Moments that had once been strictly professional started to feel more personal. Neither of them had planned it that way. In ice dance, romantic relationships between partners can sometimes complicate things. The pressure of elite sport already pushes athletes to emotional limits, and mixing personal feelings with competitive expectations has ended more than a few promising teams. But with Chock and Bates, the opposite seemed to happen. Their connection deepened. On the ice, the change became visible almost immediately. Their movements looked more relaxed, less mechanical. Transitions between elements flowed with a natural ease that judges often reward but rarely explain. The chemistry audiences sensed in their performances no longer needed to be choreographed. It was real. Fans noticed it first. Then commentators began mentioning it, and eventually the results reflected it. Year after year, the team climbed higher in the rankings. Their programs grew more ambitious, blending technical difficulty with dramatic storytelling that made them stand out in a discipline where many teams follow similar patterns. Small victories turned into major podium finishes. World Championship medals began appearing. Eventually, the breakthrough arrived that few partnerships ever achieve: 3 consecutive world titles. By the early 2020s, Chock and Bates were no longer simply another strong team in international ice dance. They had become one of the defining partnerships of their era. At the same time, their personal story continued evolving. In 2022, they shared news that many fans had already suspected. After more than a decade skating side by side, their partnership had grown into a relationship beyond the rink. They were engaged. 2 years later, in 2024, they married. It was a rare kind of story in elite sport. Two athletes who had spent nearly half their lives chasing the same dream, now continuing that journey as husband and wife. By the time the 2026 Winter Olympics in Milan approached, the narrative surrounding them had taken on an almost cinematic shape.